On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Mercer County, I welcome you to the program Beyond the Wellhead, How Fracking Harms Our Health, with Dr. Ned Katire. It was 5 years ago that Dr. Jill Kreisky, who was then the Associate Director of the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, presented a program on the mission of the organization and also provided information on the state of research on health impacts linked to unconventional oil and gas development. It is fitting that we return to the topic as our April program. It is the month when we celebrate Earth Day. Dr. Ned Katire is a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area pediatrician who is a consultant for the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, bringing attention to the health impacts of fracking in the Marcellus Shale gas patch. He is a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Environmental Health and is a board member of Physicians for Social Responsibility Pennsylvania. Dr. Katire's work connects the rapid expansion of shale gas and petrochemical development in the Ohio River Valley with the local and regional health impacts currently experienced by residents, as well as the global, ecologic, and public health catastrophes resulting from plastic pollution and climate change that threaten the health and well-being of everyone. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you to everybody. Let me see if I can share this screen without losing a finger. Can you see that screen? Is that good? Very good. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, it's nice to be with everybody today. Happy Earth Week. With Earth Day next Thursday. Let me start by saying that I remember the very first Earth Day back in April of 1970. I was 10 years old in the 4th grade. And where I grew up in New Jersey, Earth Day was a really big deal. It still is with me every single year. For me, Earth Day is the day to rekindle the spirit of nature and to reconnect with all other life forms on the only planet we have to ride on. So 1 year after that Earth Day, the Environmental Rights Amendment was ratified by Pennsylvania voters. Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution grants Pennsylvanians the right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Not just for all of us, but also for our children and our grandchildren and generations to come. That was 50 years ago. And Pennsylvania had a very good reason, several good reasons actually, to pass this constitutional amendment. Western Pennsylvania has a long history of extracting and burning fossil fuels. The first commercial oil well was drilled just across the border where you are in Crawford County in 1859. This photo shows oil and gas wells in Washington, Pennsylvania, close to where I live, in 1882. Oil and gas wells as far as the eye can see. And this was a common sight in Western Pennsylvania back in the day. But 100 years before Drake's oil well, coal was king. Pennsylvania's coal industry began in the city of Pittsburgh on Mount Washington, which was referred to as Coal Hill, in 1760. That's 260 years ago. Because of the close proximity to the coal and to the city's 3 rivers, the iron and steel industry settled along the banks of the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and the Ohio. Powered by coal, the industry created iron and steel to build our country's infrastructure. A terrible pollution of the air and the rivers was a feature and not a bug of the steel industry. And it resulted in a lot of disease and premature death to workers and to residents nearby. Eventually, most of the steel industry went away, though some of it still remains in the Mon Valley and the Ohio Valley, and continues to be a stubborn and dangerous source of pollution in the region. And now we have a different kind of fossil fuel that is being extracted in great quantities and at great risk to the air, the water, and to our health. This is unconventional shale gas development based on horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking. Now, I'll explain what that is in a minute. There's a lot of oil and gas drilling going on in the United States, a lot of fracking. The best known areas are the Marcellus Shale and the Utica Shale in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. There are shale plays in Texas and New Mexico, Oklahoma. There's fracking in Colorado and Utah, Wyoming, and the Bakken Shale in North Dakota. There's also quite a bit of oil and gas extraction in California. They've been working on legislation to ban fracking in that state, but my understanding is that was defeated last week. This is what fracking looks like in Pennsylvania, the second largest natural gas producing state in the nation. We've got more than 12,800 active shale gas wells in the state, which you see as the purple dots on this updated frac tracker map. Most of the activity is up in northeastern and southwestern Pennsylvania, and almost all of it has happened in the last 10 to 12 years. The green dots show the location of several hundred compressor stations, and the yellow dots indicate where violations have occurred so far. And you can see there are more violations than actual wells. In addition to all these fracked gas wells, Pennsylvania has hundreds of thousands of conventional oil and gas wells. 200,000 at least have been abandoned or left uncapped. These wells leak volatile organic compounds and methane into the atmosphere, contributing to air pollution and to climate change. It's important to remember that the real prize of this part of the Marcellus Shale region, especially in this area in southwestern Pennsylvania, is ethane, which is a liquid hydrocarbon released from the shale alongside all the methane. The ethane is used to make plastic and other petrochemicals. All of these wells that you see here on the frac tracker map, they're orange dots in southwest Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia, on both sides of the Ohio River. They produce ethane, which will go to this massive ethane cracker plant being built by Royal Dutch Shell, just 24 miles down the Ohio River and upwind from downtown Pittsburgh. You can see here where the Shell cracker plant is located relative to the Pittsburgh International Airport, downtown Pittsburgh and its surrounding suburbs. Historically, we know that a lot of air emissions will travel with the prevailing west to east winds along the river valley toward downtown. Water pollution from this new plastic and petrochemical facility will go in the opposite direction, downstream into Ohio, West Virginia, and beyond. The cracker plant is one of the largest ever built anywhere, and it will transform fracked ethane molecules into ethylene. Once the plant is completed and operational in the next year or so, it will produce millions of tons of these tiny plastic polyethylene pellets known as nurdles, which are put in boxes and sent to plastics factories around the country and around the world to create one thing nature doesn't need any more of. And I don't have to tell you that we don't need more plastic, especially single-use plastic that is causing a global ecological catastrophe in every corner of the world. Now, let's talk about what fracking is. On the left is a graphic of old-fashioned drilling, sticking a pipe vertically into the ground into a shallow reservoir of oil and gas, and up comes that black gold Beverly Hillbilly style. That's not fracking. Fracking is the middle well in this image, where the drilling goes much deeper, a mile or more, to reach an ancient shale formation. Then the well is turned horizontally, so the drilling can proceed laterally for a few miles more. So once the well is drilled and the pipes are cemented in place, millions of gallons of fresh water and chemicals and thousands of pounds of sand are forced into the well under extremely high pressure to fracture the shale and allow the methane, ethane, and other hydrocarbons that were locked in the shale to be released and collected at the surface. But hydrocarbons aren't the only thing that come back up. Solid drill cuttings, rock and dirt, drilling mud, and salty corrosive brine return to the surface. The solid waste and liquid flowback are contaminated with fracking chemicals, heavy metals, and other earth elements normally found in these radioactive shale formations. Pennsylvania's Marcellus Shale is highly radioactive, and water-soluble radium-226 that has a half-life of 1,600 years and radium-228 with a half-life of just under 6 years, they are in high concentrations in the Marcellus Shale. And by the way, geologists have known how radioactive the shale is for many, many decades. Much of the waste is dumped in commercial and municipal landfills where it sits percolating and then it leaches into the surrounding soil, surface waters, and groundwater. And, with the Tri-County landfill being proposed for your area, it's important to understand what's going to be dumped there is going to be highly toxic fracking waste and fracking waste that's radioactive. And eventually what goes into the landfill will percolate and end up out of the landfill in the leachate. And that's a big, big problem. Liquid flowback, some of the liquid flowback is taken by trucks and injected deep underground, a process that's shown to contaminate streams and cause earthquakes. In addition, some of the toxic brine is diabolically packaged and marketed to municipalities and consumers as de-icing agents and pool salts. The Pennsylvania legislature has a bill in consideration that will allow the spreading of this radioactive brine on all Pennsylvania roads. Seriously. There are non-fuel gases, the fumes of fossil fuels, they return to the surface and contaminate the air we breathe. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, like benzene cause cancer in children and adults. Toluene is another VOC that can cause permanent neurological problems. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons can act as endocrine disrupting chemicals, which interfere with hormone function in the body, especially related to growth and brain development in infants and children. In adults, exposure can lead to cancer. Radium-226 decays into radon gas, which collects in basements and crawl spaces in homes near fracked gas wells. Radon, as you may know, is the second leading cause of lung cancer behind tobacco smoke. Finally, large amounts of methane leak inadvertently and are vented and flared on purpose into the atmosphere during fracking operations. Methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas, and it leaks like crazy from fracked gas infrastructure. Any greenhouse gas savings you might get from burning natural gas instead of coal is instead squandered by allowing methane to carelessly escape from fracked gas infrastructure. The wellhead isn't the only place where harmful pollution is generated. Contamination of the air, the water, and the soil occur at every point of fracked gas infrastructure. Diesel emissions result from the thousands of heavy trucks needed to service each well, and from diesel engines on well pads that generate the enormous pressures necessary to fracture the shale. Pipelines scar the landscape. They occasionally leak and spill, and they can corrode and explode. Pigging stations maintain the patency of pipelines by launching air toxics into the atmosphere. Compressor stations that push the gas through the pipelines emit copious volumes of air pollution. Pollution continues at gas processing facilities that separate and refine the hydrocarbons, and then beyond at local cracker plants and other petrochemical facilities. Finally, a large amount of fracked oil and gas is exported to other states and distant countries with an insatiable appetite for energy and single-use plastic.
And this fracking is happening in neighborhoods where people live and children play. In Pennsylvania, the minimum setback distance for fracked gas from a fracked gas site to a home, a child care center, a school, or another building is 500 feet. Well pads and pipelines, compressor stations, and processing facilities are all operating around where children go to school. This is the Fort Cherry kindergarten through 12 school campus in Washington County. The closest well pad that you see on the left is 900 feet from this school's driveway, 900 feet from the only entrance and exit into and out of this school's campus. This school is surrounded currently by 5 gas wells in close proximity, as well as pipelines and compressors. An enormous cryogenic processing facility is located just 5 miles away. And fracking is happening around where children play. I don't think any parent, and certainly no pediatrician or nurse, would look at this photograph and find it acceptable in any way. Because they are growing and developing rapidly, children are more vulnerable to environmental toxics. Families are surrounded by this dirty and dangerous industry. Around 18 million Americans live within 1 mile of an active oil and gas well. This is my friend Lois and her 4 children standing outside their house in rural Washington County. Lois gives frack land tours to anyone who wants to see, hear, and smell for themselves what's going on in the Marcellus Shale gas patch. I helped Lois give these tours, and over the last few years, they've been well attended by elected officials, by journalists from all over the country and all over the world, local residents and worried visitors from far away trying to stop countries in their own, stop fracking in their own states and their own countries. And healthcare providers as well come on these tours, and they want to learn more about the health risks their patients are taking living and working near fracking operations. You can see Lois's house in the center. That's the star in the center of this photo. Less than 1,000 feet away from Lois's house is a small compressor station indicated by the yellow thumbtack. You can also see 3 pink balloons indicating where gas wells are located, and a couple of white balloons indicating where pipeline maintenance occurs with pig launchers. To some people, living in proximity to industrial sites like these might not seem so bad until we zoom out. And we can see the extent of fracking operations that surround Lois's house. Again, her house is in the center. It's harder to see. It's the star in the center of this photo. And this is in Washington County, which is Pennsylvania's most heavily fracked county. This is a whole lot of fracking going on in the hilly, idyllic countryside. I didn't include markers for the thousands of conventional gas wells in the county, many of which are uncapped and abandoned. And I didn't include most of the wells that are present in other adjacent counties, and there are a lot of them. It's not just one gas well or compressor station that threatens Lois's air and the air her kids and her neighbors have to breathe and the water that they drink. It's the aggregate of all of these sources of pollution that threaten their health and safety. People who live near gas wells, near fracked gas operations, report many different adverse health symptoms. My colleagues at Environmental Health Project published a study in 2017 looking at health symptoms of adults residing within 1 kilometer of a fracked well pad in Pennsylvania. Sleep disruption is often the result of nonstop truck activity, noise, odors, and light while a well is being drilled and fracked. Headaches and throat irritation are also widely reported. Stress and anxiety are side effects of living nearby fracking sites. Some of these symptoms look like nuisance complaints. But when people are exposed to fracking activity and the air pollution and the pollution in the soil and the water, when they're exposed day in and day out for months and even years at a time, these acute symptoms of exposure and stress often become chronic medical problems. In December, concerned health professionals of New York and Physicians for Social Responsibility released the 7th edition of the Fracking Science Compendium, which is a fully referenced, up-to-the-minute compilation of the evidence outlining the risks and harms of fracking, collected from more than 2,000 peer-reviewed medical and scientific papers, investigations by journalists, and government reports. This essential report is a collection of the evidence-based science, which tells us that fracking has grave health, environmental justice, and climate impacts. I helped review and edit the 6th and 7th editions of the compendium. And like every edition before it, the 7th edition contains no evidence that fracking can operate without threatening public health directly or without imperiling climate stability upon which public health depends. And I want to just say that there are no scientific studies, zero, demonstrating that fracking is safe. There are a number of examples of drilling and fracking activities contaminating rivers, streams, and aquifers in Pennsylvania and other oil and gas patches, making the water unsafe to drink. In Pennsylvania, fracking companies have been criminally charged and fined for illegally polluting surface and groundwater. More than 200 different air pollutants have been identified near drilling and fracking operations. 61 are classified as hazardous air pollutants with known health risks, and 26 are classified as endocrine disruptors. Several others increase cancer risk. Common air toxics that produce serious health problems include fine and ultrafine particulate matter, which can cause heart and respiratory symptoms, cancer and chronic inflammatory disorders. Volatile organic compounds can cause end organ disease and cancer, as I mentioned before, and neurologic problems. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, the PAHs, cause endocrine disruption, immune dysfunction, and cancer. Aerosolized fracking chemicals, many of them are very dangerous. Silica dust can cause chronic lung disease and lung cancer. Heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and mercury can cause and can severely injure infants and young children. Radioactive particles and gases, carbon monoxide, which is toxic to every human, ozone-forming nitrogen oxides. Ozone damages every person's lung function. And greenhouse gases, for instance, carbon dioxide and methane, which exacerbate global warming and climate change. With the exception of silica dust, all of these air toxics are invisible. We know that the tiny particles, smelly vapors, and chemicals that constitute modern air pollution can impair fertility, complicate pregnancies, and lead to poor birth outcomes. Birth defects and developmental delays caused by some components of toxic air pollution lead to lifelong health burdens for young children and for their families and for society. Lung cancer, bladder cancer, and other types of adult and childhood cancers are linked to air pollution, which impacts practically every organ system in the body, not just the lungs, but also the heart and brain, and the liver and the kidneys. Recent research describes the links between air pollution and the development of obesity, type 2 diabetes, dementia, anxiety, depression, and other forms of mental illness. It is now estimated that nearly 9 million people worldwide die prematurely each year as a result of air pollution, and that includes hundreds of thousands of Americans. Multiple studies now show us that living near fracking sites can complicate pregnancies and lead to poor birth outcomes like prematurity, low birth weight, small for gestational age newborns, and birth defects, each one having lifelong consequences for children and their parents. In addition to reproductive problems and poor birth outcomes, fracking is linked to other medical problems like childhood asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, in adults, heart disease, and increased cancer risk in people living close by. From 2008 to 2018,
in 4 heavily fracked counties in southwestern Pennsylvania, 2 reporters at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette uncovered the human toll of fracking. 27 cases of Ewing sarcoma, which is a very rare and frequently fatal bone cancer in childhood, and 40 cases of other rare cancers, for a total of 67 rare cancers in children, teenagers, and young adults. Only about 200 cases of Ewing sarcoma are diagnosed in the United States each year. And as cancers go in children, it is especially brutal. In Washington County, Pennsylvania's most heavily fracked county, where I'm from, 6 cases of Ewing sarcoma and 30 other rare childhood cancers were counted in the one county. These numbers are far more than would be expected to occur in a similarly populated, mostly rural area over a 10-year period. And new cases keep popping up in the region. Parents and physicians are very concerned that pollution and radioactive toxic waste from fracking operations may be to blame for this outbreak of rare childhood cancers. 6 months after Templeton and Hopi published The Human Toll, I had the chance to go to the State House, and along with dozens of concerned community members, we spoke with Governor Wolf and other lawmakers, and we demanded a thorough and transparent investigation into the cause of these rare pediatric cancers. 4 days later, Governor Wolf announced the creation of 2 studies to be conducted by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. You may have heard that the governor originally committed $3.9 million for the studies. In actuality, only about $2.5 million is being spent by the Department of Health, which has contracted with the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health to perform the studies, which are just now getting underway. Now, we expect both studies to be completed by the end of the year. I expect that neither study is going to, at the end of the day, tell us what is causing this outbreak of rare childhood cancers. In the meantime, last June, the Pennsylvania grand jury released a scathing report about the harms to health, property, and livelihoods of Pennsylvanians living and working near fracked gas operations. In addition to proving criminality within the industry, the grand jury uncovered negligence, incompetence, corruption, and complicity by the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Health, 2 government agencies in charge of regulating an industry that has caused so much damage to public health. Time and again in its report, the grand jury kept returning to the fact that fracking was injuring children the most. The grand jury went on to give 8 recommendations for state regulators to try to fix the problems they found, and so clearly documented in the report. And you can see on this slide what those 8 recommendations are. But reading between the lines, it's clear that the risks from fracking are inevitable because fracking is inherently dirty and dangerous. And industry rules and government regulations will unlikely fix that fact. The evidence is in, and it's indisputable. Fracked gas makes people sick, degrades the environment, and accelerates the global warming and climate change. The industry is well aware of how inherently risky their operations are. According to Chesapeake Energy's annual report issued last month, the oil and gas business involves a variety of operating risks, including the risk of fire, explosions, blowouts, pipe failure, abnormally pressurized formations, and environmental hazards such as oil spills, natural gas leaks, ruptures, or discharges of toxic gases. All of the fracking companies say the same thing in their annual reports to shareholders, but nowhere does Chesapeake or any of these companies acknowledge the risks fracking poses to public health and safety. And it deals with climate change only in the abstract, never admitting that fracking is a major accelerant to the climate crisis, which, as you all know, threatens everybody's health. Higher hospitalization rates from cancer, asthma, heart disease have been documented for people living near oil and gas development. It's also linked to other health symptoms like rashes, fatigue, nausea, sinus problems, and headaches, as I mentioned before. Anxiety and depression are also common symptoms reported by residents living nearby. As I mentioned before, fracking brings foul odors, light pollution, and noise pollution, which can lead to loss of sleep, cognitive impairment, and stress. In fact, stress is a side effect of living close to fracking operations, and it exacerbates mental health conditions in gas patch communities. Crime, drug and alcohol abuse, sex trafficking, sexually transmitted diseases, and traffic fatalities all happen at higher rates wherever fracking operates. Fracking jobs are some of the most dangerous jobs in America. Industry workers who are exposed to physical injury, air pollution, chemicals, and radiation may not have the personal protective equipment necessary and training necessary to protect themselves and their families from harm. Finally, I want to end by talking about the impact that fracking has on climate change. The oil and gas industry likes to say that fracking helps solve climate change, but that's a myth. A great deal of diesel fuel and natural gas is used in the process of extracting methane, which then leaks abundantly from fracked gas infrastructure. The truth is, and I said this before, fracked gas is as harmful to the climate as coal. Fracking accelerates climate change and threatens the health of every child on the planet today, as well as generations to come. Fracking is simply incompatible to solve the climate crisis. It accelerates climate change. It's not a bridge on the highway to a cleaner future that some would like us to think. Instead, fracked gas is a bridge on the highway to climate catastrophe. I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your attention. Look, I know as a father and as a pediatrician that children live in a world shaped by our choices. Unfortunately, we're running out of time to make better choices. It's time for humanity to move beyond fossil fuels, beyond fracking, and beyond plastic, and work together for a clean and sustainable solutions to the climate crisis. Let us commit to make every day Earth Day, to reconnect to the natural world and choose to protect the health, the safety, and the future prosperity of our children, our grandchildren, and all generations to come. Thank you very much. Okay.
I am trying to get back. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
You just want to go ahead and turn your video on, Hannah?
Let me see where that is. There we go. Thank you. Carissa, before I make closing remarks, will you please let our attendees know about where to find the information that was provided?
Yeah. So here, I'll go ahead and turn my video on. So we've gone ahead and recorded all of this. We're going to make it available on the library's Facebook page as well as the library's YouTube channel. If you haven't been to either of those, we're under the Community Library of the Shenango Valley. On YouTube, you can just type that in, same as with Facebook. I'll be posting this probably Monday after I get it processed. And we're also going to be providing links to the slides that were in today's presentation.
And do we have some questions for Dr. Katayer?
If you guys want to go ahead and use the raise hand button if you have a question, that way I can see who's looking or who has questions. Okay, Bernice, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I wanted to comment on that, in that time frame that expires about that lawsuit or the appeal. And I wondered what you thought was a strong point to make, because obviously you don't want to reiterate what everybody else has said 1,000 times, but if there's a strong point that perhaps is overlooked often, I'd like to make that my point of comment.
Are you referring to the Tri-County landfill that's being
Correct, I
proposed?
am. Yes.
Well, you can make a number of points to oppose the creation of this landfill, which I believe is in an area where there was a landfill many years ago that closed. There are a lot of reasons to oppose it. I know of not one reason to support it, at least from a public health standpoint. Look, I'm a doctor, I'm a pediatrician. I'm not going to apologize for putting public health first. I really don't care about companies making money, and I really don't care about jobs when it comes to this industry. I think any job that is created that directly harms and threatens the health of my family and of your families, those jobs aren't worth filling, period. What's going to happen, what happens is that the waste, the solid waste primarily, as I mentioned, is contaminated. This is the rock and the dirt and the drilling muds, the stuff that comes up back in solid form gets dumped into the landfills. This waste is very wet, and some of the liquid flow back is also included. And the liquids include the fracking chemicals themselves, which many of which are toxic, some of which are carcinogenic, some of which cause endocrine disruption, which is very, very damaging to the health of fetuses and of infants and children. Well, this stuff gets dumped into a landfill. It gets dumped at the highest point of the landfill, right? Now, whatever dries off can get blown off the landfill. So it's quite possible that particles with heavy metals attached, with radioactive particles get blown off the landfill and fill the air in neighborhoods nearby. But the other thing that happens is this fracking waste sits on top of this landfill, and then there's more stuff that's put on it. And just think of coffee percolating, and the liquid will eventually make its way down into the bottom of the landfill, having taken up everything on the way down, including the toxic materials from the fracking operations. And that water is collected. Every landfill collects that water as leachate. Now, the question is what to do with that leachate, which is toxic, it's radioactive. And I'm assuming they're going to be putting just regular commercial and municipal waste in that landfill as well as the fracking stuff. So plastic breaks down, it leaches lots of harmful chemicals into that water. What do you do with it? Modern water treatment plants are not designed to handle many of the chemicals and is completely not prepared to handle radioactivity. What we found out, what happened in Westmoreland is the radioactive fracking waste destroyed the bacteria in the water treatment plant that is used to treat the water. And so the toxic water was allowed to be dumped into the Mon River. This was a scandal. It should have been a much bigger scandal than it was. On a parallel planet, it certainly would have been a horrible scandal. I mean, many of us in Washington County get our water from the Mon, and to find out that fracking waste and other leachate has been dumped untreated into our water source that's a little bit, that's more than a little bit concerning. A lot of the leachate, some of the leachate from the Tri-County will make its way into local streams, and eventually up where you are, I imagine, eventually down into the Ohio River. But it's really not a good thing for communities. There are smells that are associated with it. Anyone who thinks it's a good idea should really go to other communities in Westmoreland, in Washington County. There's the Arden landfill. Should really talk to people who live around it just to see what an unpleasant experience it is living near a landfill. A lot of diesel trucks, the diesel trucks that I guess, Waste Management has natural gas trucks, but there's a lot of truck activity in and out all the time of these landfills. And it's really time to move beyond this garbage. And that's what this whole idea of fossil fuels and garbage that it creates and the pollution that it creates. It was good while it lasted, but the truth is it has to stop, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a hardship for some people, for a lot of people. But we have to make the shift away from fossil fuels, away from plastic, away from the need to have all of these huge and polluting landfills. So I hope that the residents up there in Mercer County can really have an impact on this decision and force the landfill not to be created there.
Okay, we've got Lynn. Lynn, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This presentation was great. I agree with everything that you've been presenting. And I'm sure, though, that the oil and gas companies are not very happy with you doing this. Do you get a lot of blowback from them, or any problems with the oil and gas companies?
No. Well, not that I see. I mean, I suppose there are sites on the internet where you will find my name and perhaps bad things said in industry websites. I don't read them. I'm not interested in what the companies have to say. The companies, remember, aren't people. Companies have no feelings. Companies don't care about health. Companies care about only one thing, and that's to make money, which is fine. I mean, that's capitalism. That's the way things work in this country. I understand that. I have met many people who work in the industry. They work on the rigs. They work in the gas patch. They work at the company's headquarters. They drive around in the white trucks. They drive the brine trucks. I've met all of these people. The people who actually work in the industry, they're not evil people. I mean, they're good, decent people. They're trying to make a living, put food on the table for their families. I get that. I have nothing against them. The industry is doing what they do. But I will tell you that I am doing what I do. I'm a doctor. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a public health expert. I am speaking the truth. And by the way, I'm not getting paid by anybody to be sitting here talking about this with you, presenting this with you. I'm a consultant for Southwest Pennsylvania Health Project. I get a small stipend for my work. That's it. I'm doing this because fracking is wrong. Fracking is dangerous. Fracking damages the health of people that I know, people that I have treated, people who are acquaintances, colleagues, and friends. It's not a secret that this is a dangerous activity, that oil and gas development is dangerous. It's not a secret that oil and gas development and burning fossil fuels is accelerating climate change, which is a crisis that we have to get a grip of. We all agree with that. You know, more than 70% of Americans agree that climate change is real. A majority agree that it's us. 78% of Americans, this is from the Yale Climate Communications Program, 78% of Americans want their kids to learn about climate change and the consequences and the causes of it in school. So, I mean, Americans get this. You know, I think it's not hard to understand what's causing the climate crisis. Every doctor knows that air pollution and pollution of the water is bad, right? I don't think there's any doctor that says, you shouldn't worry about breathing in diesel smoke or air pollution. I mean, every doctor knows this. Most people know I don't want to breathe dirty air coming out of a smokestack. The companies do what they do, Lynn, and that's what they do. They have the government, unfortunately, who are doing their bidding and making it easy for them, and not enough legislators opposing what's happening, or at least being a champion of public health. We have very few champions of public health in Harrisburg. There are a few. I'm lucky to know them. Hopefully some of you are lucky to know them too. We need more of them. But as they say, it is what it is. Whether you want to argue about the fact that health is being impacted, the fact is the climate crisis is real, it's happening, and we need to stop this.
So we need to talk with our legislators a whole lot more.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that if you're willing to do it. I enjoy talking to some of the legislators. I have to tell you that going on legislative visits, I've been to Harrisburg, I've been to Washington, I've been to visits at local offices. It's not something that I like doing. I find it uncomfortable. It's just me. When I talk to politicians, very often I see that their eyes glaze over. I've been told actually by a state representative who's actually a champion of public health, has a very strong environmental record here in Pennsylvania, that only 2 or 3 elected officials in Harrisburg would be able to absorb anything that I just said in the last half hour. Most of them, like he, hated science in school. Excuse me. And they just don't get it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? I don't see any other hands, but I'm going to put the call out there. If you can't find your raise hand button, it's going to be at the bottom of your screen in case you had another question.
We'll wait till Dr. Katayer returns for closing remarks. There he is. Hello.
Oh.
Is Dr. Katayer on audio?
I'm back, yep.
Great. First, I want to thank you, Dr. Katayer, for this informative and illuminating program on a topic of very grave concern. And the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, as you know, have been strong advocates in seeing a change in this direction, sponsoring an annual public health conference in Pittsburgh. I'm sure you've attended. So it's one of our mission to see this righted. Our chapter is most appreciative of your joining us today and the fact that your presentation and your slides will be available to a wider audience. We also thank the Community Library of the Shenango Valley for its partnership in presenting these virtual programs, and to Carissa Centony, Reference and Adult Programs Librarian, for coordinating them. I don't know what we would do without you during these programs. But we always look ahead to our next month's program. On Saturday, May 15th at 2 o'clock, Lisette Olson, Executive Director of AWARE, Mercer County Center Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, will speak on human trafficking in Mercer County. And you mentioned that in your presentation, didn't you, Dr. Katayer? The human trafficking that is a part of the general operation of fracking. Anyway, it will be a topic of great interest to many. We hope that you will join us. And I want to thank all of you again for joining us today. Stay well and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Happy Earth Day. And I'll have this all ready on Monday. So for those of you who are looking on Facebook or YouTube, it'll be up there hopefully Monday. Give me about until the afternoon.
Thanks again, Carissa.
All right. Bye all. I'm going to go ahead and hop off.